where it says
Okay.
participants chat.
I believe I'm recording right now.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all right. Moving into the first slide. So I just wanted to highlight, because I don't know how much you guys know about our two native trout species, but so this map here of Arizona and New Mexico shows the actual projected historic ranges of the two species. So in yellow, that's what's considered historic range for Apache trout. So they're really only considered historically native to the upper White River, Black River, and Little Colorado River drainages. And then Gila trout, their historic range is everything in orange. And so they're considered native to most of the upper Gila River watershed in both Arizona and New Mexico. And then also several watersheds in central Arizona, the Agua Fria River, the Verde River, and Tonto Creek drainages. So Gila trout were originally listed as endangered in 1967. However, thanks to a lot of conservation efforts, they were downlisted to threatened in 2006. Currently, there's about 27 occupied streams throughout their historical range for Gila trout, which is the most it's been in a long, long time. There are 5 relic lineages or populations that have actually survived through from pre-European settlement times. So all the genetic makeup of Gila trout is contained within just 5 populations, because at one point that's all we have left. And so those 5 lineages, as we call them, play an important role in conservation. They're Main Diamond Creek, South Diamond Creek, Whiskey Creek, Iron Creek, and Spruce Creek. And I'll mention that all of these creeks are actually in the Gila River wilderness over in New Mexico. So the only populations that survived through to modern day times are from New Mexico in the upper Gila River watershed. And then current threats to Gila trout are really, the biggest one is hybridization with rainbow trout in particular, but they can also hybridize with cutthroat trout, though there aren't as many cutthroat down here to worry about. And then there's also big time problems with competition and predation from other non-native trout species like brook trout and brown trout, which will prey on them or compete with them for food and resources. Another big threat that's really going to be a problem for Gila trout going forward is climate change. And in particular, it's more the increased frequency and severity of droughts that we're seeing. You know, particularly right now in Arizona, we're in a really bad drought. Things are as low as they really have ever been, and it's only supposed to get worse. And so that's the bigger problem. Temperatures are a concern too, but not as much as you might think. And then finally, catastrophic wildfires. So we've had a lot of big wildfires that have actually caused problems with several of our Gila trout populations here over the last few years. And that's, again, a continued major threat for Gila trout. So now I'm going to quickly kind of try to go through all of our conservation work that we did this past year. And I should mention at this point that if you guys have a question, feel free to just stop me. It doesn't need to be a formal presentation where I just lecture at you guys for the whole time. So please feel free to stop me if you have questions. So moving on to our first stream, which is actually going to be Cave Creek, the Cave Creek complex, really. And so we actually started doing some work out there this past year. And really, we're looking at all 3 of those kind of forks in the upper section. So there's the North Fork. It's not called the Middle Fork, but it basically is. It's basically the main stem, Cave Creek up high, and then the South Fork of Cave Creek. And so this past year, we went out and we did some initial. The meeting now has unlimited minutes, just as an FYI. So they didn't kick you off. Just so you know, in case you didn't see that. But we did some initial habitat surveys in the Cave Creek complex this past year, both the North Fork, South Fork, and the main stem, just trying to get a feel for what the habitat was like. It was impacted pretty heavily from the Horseshoe 2 fire, which I believe was 2011, I want to say, or maybe it was 2014, one of those 2 years. And so we were waiting on the habitat to recover to the point where we felt it was suitable for trout. And these surveys that we did this past year suggested that, yes, the habitat's recovered to the point where it's suitable for trout, again, at this point. And so we were able to install 2 temperature loggers this year, because one of our big concerns with the streams is how hot does it get in the summer? Does it get too warm for them in there? And so that's what we're really trying to investigate with this. So we got temperature loggers in both the North Fork and the main stem, but we still need temperature loggers in both the South Fork and then East Turkey Creek, which I won't talk about because we haven't actually gone in there to do any work, but it is on our radar as well. And then going forward, so there is a small population of rainbow trout currently present in the North Fork of Cave Creek. So we're looking to mechanically remove those rainbow trout and replace them with Gila trout. And so in addition to that, we're also going to be using a tool called environmental DNA, which is where we can actually take water samples and detect the DNA of different organisms that are actually living in the stream. In this case, we're looking for non-native salmonids. We're going to be doing a bunch of that work in all three of the different forks of Cave Creek, so the South Fork, the Main Stem, and North Fork. Looking to see, one, if there are any non-native trout in those other two forks. And then in the North Fork, after we think we've removed all the rainbow trout, we'll be doing that to confirm that they're gone. Because again, we can't have rainbow trout in the same stream as Gila trout. It just doesn't work. We're going to continue to further evaluate the habitat. Again, this is where you guys are going to come in and help with us. We're hoping you guys can help us get some more temp loggers out there. We're also hoping that you can provide some more money to also help with paying for those eDNA sample analyses. Those are kind of expensive as well. And then finally, we're looking to stock Gila trout and create a Gila trout fishery in all three of those streams. And we would look to hopefully open them relatively quickly. So now, kind of staying in your neck of the woods, but moving up to the Safford area and Mount Graham. Some of you are probably familiar with Fry Creek. I'm guessing it was open to angling for wild Gila trout prior to 2017. And then the Fry fire happened. Following the Fry fire, that population was totally wiped out. It was completely gone. But luckily, the habitat wasn't impacted too badly. And so we actually began restocking efforts to restart a population in Fry Creek back in 2019. And we continue those efforts this past year. So in 2019, we stocked both eyed eggs in the stream and in the gravel, and then also fingerling trout in the fall. And then this past year, we again stocked about 16,000 Gila trout, eyed eggs, they're South Diamond Creek lineage. And then we followed those up with some previous surveys in both May and August, and we were able to confirm survival from both our 2019 fall fingerling fish stocking and then also the egg stocking from this year, which was really cool. So there are fish in Fry Creek again. They seem to be doing well. And then on top of that, we stocked an additional 502 Gila trout in October and November of this past year. And so Fry Creek is well on its way to recovery from that fire, which is just great. And in the future, we've got one more year of stocking. So typically when we start a new population, we stock for 3 years with Gila trout. And then after that, we kind of let them go and only stock if needed when they need to be supplemented. And we'll continue to monitor the population. And until we've finished our 3 years of stocking, we're typically pretty hands-off with our monitoring surveys. They're typically visual surveys where we're just walking the stream, visually looking for trout. Yeah.
Zach, real quick. The Zoom meeting is asking me if I want to start this meeting at 7 o'clock. I'm not clicking on it yet until we lose this meeting. Okay, let's see how long we can go.
Sounds good. It did say that it should be unlimited minutes now, so I think they won't kick us off. But
good.
So staying on Mount Graham, we actually have another stream that we did a bunch of work on this past year. That's Marijilda Creek, which is just a couple canyons over from Fry Creek. Some of you might have been aware, but in Marijilda used to have a small population of rainbow by Apache trout hybrids in it. The department began work back in, I think, 2015 to remove those fish, that small population, so that we could stock Gila trout in there, start a Gila trout recovery population. Those efforts were thought to be successful. We had several surveys in a row without any detecting any of those fish. So we thought the stream was fishless, but we need to confirm it with environmental DNA, which is again that technique I talked about before. And so this year we went out and we actually did a full eDNA survey of the entire canyon, it was a very difficult survey. Just some rugged, rough country. So in total, we had 23 sites. You can see them on the map, which is to my right. If you're one of those black dots is where we took an eDNA sample point. And all three of these came back for what's called the any salmon marker. So the any salmon marker is looking for DNA of any trout species. And so that confirmed that there are no non-native trout left in Marijilda. And so because of that, we went ahead and stocked Gila trout in there this fall. A total of 750, 250 of them went into the upper section of Marijilda, which is up by Shannon Campground. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the area. And then 500 of them went in down below, upstream of where the Around the Mountain Trail comes into Marijilda Creek on Mount Graham. And so this is exciting. This is a brand new Gila trout population that we just started here in Arizona this year. Hopefully we can open it up to angling in a few years as it continues to grow. And going forward, we're just going to continue to monitor the population. And then we've got 2 more additional years of stocking. So we'll be stocking again this fall with Gila trout. So staying kind of going up into the region 1 or kind of the eastern section of the state, we're going to Chitty Creek, which is still a tributary. It's a tributary to Eagle Creek. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eagle Creek at all.
Oh, yeah.
But it's actually one of the only places in the state where we actually have a true historical record of Gila trout actually having been pre-European settlement. So it's a very cool stream. But however, it was burned up pretty bad in a fire in 2011. And so we've been waiting on it to recover from that fire. The habitat really took a beating during that fire and the post-flooding. But we got a report this summer from one of our former fisheries program managers that he thought the stream looked like it had recovered to the point where it might be suitable for Gila trout. And so we received this report in June, but there were some things we needed to follow up on. One thing was we needed to follow up on temperature, summer temperatures again, because again, we're really concerned about that because a lot of the shading, the riparian shading for the stream had been destroyed in the fire, it had burned up. And so it really hasn't come back all that well. And so we got a temperature logger out there and we were able to look at the temperature for the entire summer. And so this figure here, sorry, I use the metrics as a scientist, but I'll translate. So 17 degrees Celsius is about 62 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're looking for stream temperatures in the summer, average daily stream temperatures to be below 20 degrees Celsius or about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything over that becomes a little bit too hot for trout to typically tolerate. If the daily temperature is that high, they can tolerate temperatures over that for a short period of time, but not when the stream is pretty much always that hot. Then it gets to be too stressful for them. What we saw in Chitty is that even in this far upper section is that temperatures were suitable. They were generally below 62 degrees below, even during the hottest part of the summer this year. So that was good to see. So Chitty seems to be suitable in that area. However, we wanted to confirm, so prior to the fire, there was a rainbow trout population in Chitty Creek that had been stocked in there historically. We thought the fire had eliminated that population, but we weren't sure. So again, we used this technique called eDNA to make sure they were gone. And unfortunately, we got, I don't know if you can see on the map, but there's a couple sites. Every one of those black dots is one of our sites in Chitty Creek for where we did eDNA. And then the green circles, which might be kind of hard to see, but they're the 2 lowest ones down by the triangle here, the barrier, and then just upstream of there. Those sites were actually positive for rainbow trout. So that suggests that there's at least a few rainbow trout that somehow managed to hang on. So what we need to do now is go out there and actually remove what's left of those rainbow trout before we can then put in a bunch of Gila trout and start stocking that stream. And we also need to continue to monitor the habitat moving forward, as there are some other additional concerns with the habitat. It's definitely still recovering from the fire, but certainly it seems to be supporting at least some rainbow trout, so it's certainly suitable for trout. So moving up to the Blue River drainage.
Zach, Chitty Creek, is that going to Upper Eagle or the Lower Eagle?
It goes into Upper Eagle Creek.
Okay.
Actually East Eagle, which then, well, I think first it goes into Salt House Creek, which then goes into East Eagle, which then flows into Main Eagle.
So is that like above or below the Honeymoon Campground?
Well upstream of Honeymoon Campground.
Well, okay. Like
yeah.
Up, okay.
Yeah,
how do you access that?
So there's a trail that you can hike down in. It's a fairly remote stream. It's not easy to access. It's like I think it's about 3 mile hike down in from the nearest access point. I forget the name of the trail, but it's a steep trail down in. It's a gorgeous place. It was beautiful in there. Saw a lot of bears this year actually when we were in there. Yeah, so that's how you access Chitty. We're moving over to the Blue River drainage now. So we've got Coleman Creek. And so this project was probably my favorite project of the entire summer. It was really cool. So we worked with New Mexico Game and Fish to actually get Gila trout from one of their streams Big Dry Creek over there. And these fish are Spruce Creek lineage, which is the rarest lineage of Gila trout in the world. But we're trying to start another replicate population of that lineage so that we have more of that those genetics on the landscape. And so they were able to go in and collect 94 Gila trout for us. Those fish were helicoptered out of Big Dry Creek, flown to an airport, loaded on a hatchery truck, where they were then driven over to Coleman Creek here in Arizona, where we then stocked them to start another new population here in Arizona this year. And so these fish, again, I'm using the metric system here, but approximately 25 millimeters is 1 inch. So 56 millimeters is about 2 inches, 249 millimeters is about 10 inches in length. These fish varied anywhere in length from about 2 to 10 inches. So we had quite a variety. The graph on the right is just kind of it's a length frequency histogram. So you have the number of fish by different length bins or different groups of different lengths. And again, it's all in millimeters, but again, 100 millimeters is 4 inches, 150 6, 200 is 8, 250 is 10, roughly. So we got a really nice distribution and size from these fish, and so we're hoping to see that some good survival from those fish, first of all, but also we're hoping to see natural reproduction from them almost immediately, because there were quite a few adults, fish that we would consider adults, that got stocked in there. And so going forward, we're going to continue to monitor that population, and then we'd like to stock it again with more Spruce Creek lineage fish this year, if possible. But again, these fish are so rare, it's very hard to get them. And so it's unlikely we'll get fish this year, but as soon as we can get more fish for the stream, we'll be looking to supplement that population. Hopefully it can grow and take off and be another really strong population here in Arizona that'll be open to angling. Another stream in the Blue River drainage that I want to talk about, but just kind of down a little farther south from Coleman Creek, is KP Creek. And so KP Creek is another stream where we have some historic records of Gila trout being pre-European settlement. There's a barrier on the stream. So it's a tributary of the Blue River. There's a barrier on the stream. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's right in this area on KP Creek. And so what we did this year is there was the wallow fire back in 2011 burned through that area really heavily. And so we're pretty sure it got rid of the Apache trout, rainbow trout hybrids that were in the stream upstream of that barrier, but we needed to confirm that. So again, we used our favorite tool, eDNA. We checked 40 different eDNA sites. So all of those black dots on there are what we call one of our eDNA sites. Again, the triangle down here is the barrier. We went in both KP and its tributary, the North Fork KP. All those sites came back negative for any trout DNA. So there's no trout above barrier. And so that's really exciting. So because KP is probably the biggest stream that we have right now, will be the biggest stream that we have right now in the state of Arizona for Gila trout. It's a very large tributary. It's got a lot of flow, a lot of water. So we're really excited about it. So we're looking to stock it this year with fish, particularly Iron Creek lineage. These fish are probably going to come from wild spawned fish in New Mexico. So we've been talking with New Mexico Fish and Game to go over to Iron Creek in New Mexico and actually spawn some of their fish stream side, and then take those offspring and stock them into KP Creek to actually start a new population over here, because Iron Creek is, again, another pretty tough lineage to get our hands on. We're looking for any way to get fish that we can. Staying in the Blue River drainage, but moving down south again, we have Raspberry Creek. So Raspberry Creek's been the focus of Gila trout introduction efforts since about 99, 2000. So they introduced them back then. They persisted until 2011 when the wallow fire came through. Wallow fire eliminated them. We waited several years for the habitat to recover from the wallow fire, and then in 2018 we began restocking them. And so this was actually our third year of stocking Gila trout. So this past October, we stocked the final 250 Gila trout into the stream. And then we also have been monitoring the population with visual surveys. We're just walking the stream looking for trout. Total, we saw 19 Gila trout this year. 18 of them were what we consider adults, or generally greater than 6 inches in length. And one of those was a sub-adult, or less than 6 inches in length. This is great. It means we've been seeing survival from all three of the stockings. And then going forward, this year we're actually going to get in and do a backpack electrofishing survey. So we're actually going to get a full population estimate on there. see how many fish are in the stream, make sure, hopefully we'll see some natural recruitment finally now that these fish are 3 years old. And hopefully, based on the different results that we get from the population estimate, we may even consider potentially opening it to angling in 2023, which is our next regulation cycle. So now I'm going to move to the last few streams, which are all in central Arizona. These two are in particular close to Payson. So we've got Chase Creek here, which is a tributary to the East Verde River. So Chase Creek has been a Gila trout recovery stream since 2017 when they started stocking Iron Creek lineage Gila trout. We got 2 years of stocking in 2017 and 2018. And then since then, we've been monitoring the population just through visual surveys because we have been waiting for that third and final stocking. What we've seen is that the population is slowly growing. This year, we had 53 Gila trout that we observed. 23 of those were considered adults, again, greater than 6 inches. 12 were subadults, so smaller than 6 inches, but not young of year. And then we saw 18 young of year fish that were born this past spring. This is the second year in a row we've seen natural recruitment or natural reproduction in Chase Creek. So we're really excited about the future of Gila trout in Chase Creek. And going forward, we've got 1 more year of stocking. Hopefully we can get some of those fish from New Mexico this year to do the final augmentation for Chase Creek. And then we'll continue to monitor the population. Likely next year will be a full population estimate. And if those numbers look good in that estimate, probably open it up to angling as soon as 2023. So staying in the East Verde River drainage, so a different tributary to the East Verde River, Dude Creek. Dude Creek's another stream that's been the site of Gila trout reintroduction efforts since '99. However, the first initial reintroduction effort didn't work all that well. They only lasted until about 2002, 2003 when they were eliminated following, I think it was the Rodeo Stefsky fire. However, we started a new population in 2015, and this population has done really well, actually. It's definitely our biggest and strongest population in the state at the moment. And so this past summer, we did our first actual full electrofishing survey where we did a population on them. In total, during that survey, we sampled a total of 347 Gila trout, a lot of fish. We also took genetic samples from 65 of them. And the reason we did that is because Dude Creek is really unique genetically. Typically, when we're doing these Gila trout recovery populations, we only stock with Gila trout from one of those 5 relic lineages or populations that I talked about. In the case of Dude Creek, we have Gila trout from 4 of the 5 relic lineages in there. We've got a much broader diversity of genetics going on in Dude Creek. And so we're really interested to see how those different genetics have been mixing, how those fish have been breeding in the stream, and so on and so forth. On the right, I've got a length frequency histogram. So again, on the Y, we've got the total number of fish observed in that length group. And on the x-axis, we have the total length. And again, it's in millimeters. Just to convert that to English, 50 is 2 inches, 104 inches, 156 inches, 208 inches, and 250 is about 10 inches in length. We saw that most of the fish were in this 100 to 150 millimeter range. We think these are likely age 1 fish, so a pretty big year class from the 2019 spawn, which is really exciting. But we had fish all the way up to 260 millimeters, which is really good. And then our total estimate, or the total number of Gila trout in the stream, was 966, which is a large population. Dude Creek's only about 2 kilometers in length. That's a lot of fish for just 2 kilometers of stream. It's not a big stream. And then the total number of what we consider adults, which are fish greater than about 5.5 inches in length, was 462 fish. And then in addition to that, we've also been doing what we call young a year counts every fall. And this is just trying to get a good index of what natural recruitment is looking like or natural reproduction is looking like in the stream. And so this past year, we observed 140 Gila trout for the young year, which is a pretty big year class, especially considering the year class before we observed about 180, which is a little bit more, but we see it looks like a very big proportion of the population estimate was consisted of those fish. And so future work with Dude Creek. So Dude Creek is really exciting. One, we're going to continue to analyze those genetic samples like I talked about. We're going to continue to monitor the population with some electrofishing surveys every couple of years. But the real exciting thing about Dude Creek is it's going to open up to catch and release angling. So wild Gila trout are going to be open to catch and release angling again for the first time in Arizona since 2017. And that's going to happen on May 1st. So 58 days away, I believe, at this point, or maybe it's 57. So these regulations are going to be catch and release only for Gila trout, single barbless hooks only, artificial fly and lure only. And again, it's only going to be open annually from May 1st to December 31st, and then it'll be closed from January 1st through April 30th. And the reason for the closure is to protect them during the spring when they're spawning and they're more vulnerable to mortality from angling. Even catch and release angling, they're more vulnerable during the spawn to mortality. And so that's why we're closing the stream. This is really excited. We're super excited about Dude Creek. And then finally, the last stream I'll talk about is Grapevine Creek. And so Grapevine Creek is a tributary to the Agua Fria River, actually. So up closer to the Prescott area. Grapevine Creek was a stream that we had Gila trout in back in 2009, and they persisted until 2017 when a fire broke through there, the Goodwin fire, eliminated that population. We went in and evaluated habitat the following year. It looked okay, still suitable for trout. And so we began reintroduction efforts in 2019. The unique thing about Grapevine Creek is all of our fish in Grapevine Creek have been stocked as eyed eggs in the gravel, which is a really cool technique. We've really only started doing this the last couple years. It's still very experimental. We don't always necessarily know exactly the best way to do it. We're still learning. So 2019, we stocked about 19,000 eggs, very successful. We had lots of survival. Fish were everywhere. This following year, we were able to stock 6,000 eggs in April. We didn't observe any survival, unfortunately. However, we were just out there actually on Tuesday and did a full electrofishing survey population estimate. And we picked up some fish that were in the size range that suggests that we may have just missed documenting the survival, and there was probably at least some survival from that egg stocking this past year. So that was good news. The other thing to note is that, so Grapevine's a very small perennial section of stream. The perennial water is only about 1.2 kilometers in length. But last year we had a really good winter. There was a lot of water, and so the stream started flowing all the way down to Big Bite Creek confluence, which is several kilometers. And so we had a bunch of Gila trout that had moved downstream into sections that were going to go dry, and actually portions of the stream had dried up behind them. And so we actually went out there and salvaged a bunch of them and moved them back upstream into portions of the perennial section of the stream that didn't have as many Gila trout as the other sections. And so we were able to save 196 of them. They were already in length, and keep in mind at this point, these fish were only 14 months old. They already varied in length from anywhere from 3 inches to almost 8 inches in length in 14 months. That is incredibly fast growth. And then I'll also mention that in our population estimate, we had a fish that was over 10 inches already out of Grapevine Creek in just under 2 years of growth. That is incredibly fast growth. So these fish are doing really well and are growing incredibly fast. So we've got one final year of augmentation stocking. Again, we'll just stock eggs. We're going to continue to monitor the population through electrofishing surveys. And then in addition to Dude Creek opening up, we're also opening up Grapevine Creek, which is really exciting. So Grapevine Creek's also going to open up to angling on May 1st. Same regulations as Dude Creek. So again, really excited to have 2 Gila trout recovery streams open to angling. This is the first time since 2017 we've had that opportunity. And then so finally, I just wanted to give you kind of a quick overview of where we stand for Gila trout in Arizona. So we've got 1 stream in the Agua Fria River drainage that's currently occupied, that's Grapevine, 2 in the Gila River, which are Fria and Marijilda, 2 in the Verde River drainage, which are Chase and Dude, and then an additional 2 in the Blue River drainage, which are Coleman and Raspberry. And so that in total, we've got 7 occupied streams in Arizona. That's the most occupied streams by Gila trout that we've had since probably the early 1900s. We're in some of the best days that we've seen for Gila trout in Arizona in a long, long time. So we're really excited about the future of Gila trout here. And now, finally, I'm going to talk about the far more interesting stuff, actually fishing for these things. So one thing I wanted to mention is we're really trying to do a lot more recreational stocking of Gila trout. So everything I've talked about so far is purely for recovery purposes. So those fish actually count towards delisting the species itself from the Endangered Species Act. And the goal there is to actually establish self-sustaining populations. When we're stocking for recreational purposes, the goal is not necessarily to establish a self-sustaining population. It's actually just to provide a unique angling opportunity for people to go out and catch these fish and really appreciate them. Primarily right now, we're doing that through getting retired broodstock from Mora National Fish Hatchery in New Mexico. Those fish are really big. They're typically around 20 to 23 inches in length when they show up here. We stock them in quite a few waters around the state. In fact, the most recent stocking was in Fria Mesa Reservoir last fall. It got about 150 of those big retired broodstock Gila trout. And then we've also recently been stocking Gila trout that we've been raising at our Canyon Creek hatchery. So they've just started raising Gila trout. You're getting the eggs from Mora National Fish Hatchery at the moment. But what I'll talk about here in a second is they're actually looking to start their own broodstock Gila trout. But some of the waters that we're currently stocking for angling purposes with Gila trout are one, the East Verde. I don't know if any of you were able to get out to the East Verde this past year, but we actually stocked it entirely with catchable sized Gila trout. We did not stock rainbow trout, which is what we typically stock in there. It was a really unique angling opportunity. I was out there a lot. I caught my personal best Gila trout. It was 17 inches. I was on a hare's ear nymph, just in case you're wondering. It was a lot of fun, and we're doing that again this year. So please make a trip up there. We also have been stocking them in Watson Lake, Lynx Lake, and Goldwater Lake, which are all up in the Prescott area. And then Fria Mesa Reservoir gets stocked fairly regularly as well. And then we've also stocked a few in the West Fork Oak Creek. And so just going forward, we're, like I mentioned before, we're at Canyon Creek Hatchery, we're really looking to try to develop a recreational broodstock of Gila trout. Because right now, our biggest problem with recreational stocking for Gila trout is we just don't have enough fish to supply all the waters we want to stock them in. And it's hard to, find enough fish. And so if we can develop our own broodstock where we're getting our own eggs and we were not dependent on somebody else just donating the eggs out of goodwill, we can really increase the number of Gila trout we stock around the state and increase the number of angling opportunities for people to catch a Gila trout. And our long-term goal with this is we're trying to replace where we currently stock rainbow trout in historic Gila trout range. We're trying to stock Gila trout in their place. We want to stop stocking the rainbows and stock Gilas instead, which I think is awesome. You get more opportunities to catch native fish. There's still going to be plenty of rainbow trout opportunities out there because Gila trout aren't native everywhere in Arizona. But I think Gila trout are so much cooler to catch and so much more fun to catch than rainbow. And then, fishing for native trout in Arizona, one thing I really wanted to mention to you, and hopefully this link works, is the Arizona Trout Challenge. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but it's a really cool program that I run. So it's actually two challenges. The first challenge is to catch all 4 of the species of wild trout in Arizona, and that's actually going to change to 5 because Gila trout's coming back starting on May 1st. I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see the website pretty well, but here's kind of the rules. If you go to our Arizona Game and Fish website, it's just /fishing and then /trout challenge is the website ID. We've got the rules and everything for the program there. So like I mentioned, there's the wild trout challenge where you got to catch all 5 species of wild trout. And then there's the other regular Arizona Trout Challenge, which is where you catch at least 6 of the 8 total trout species that we have here in Arizona. This is a really cool program. If you submit your application, it's free to enter. What you'll get is a certificate of completion for each one of the trout challenges you complete. And then for the first challenge you complete, we're giving away sweatshirts. They're really, really nice sweatshirts with the logo for the Trout Challenge on the back. And then if you complete both the wild and the regular Trout Challenge, what we've got this year, it's going to be brand new, is we've actually got an Arizona Trout Challenge coin that we're going to be giving out now for completing both of those. It's going to be a nice collectible coin. It's I don't know if you've seen like other states' trout challenges like New Mexico or the Western Native Trout Initiative's Trout Challenge. They give out a collectible coin, and so that's what this is going to be like. So those are really neat. And then the other thing is we've got this interactive Trout Challenge map. So if you click on that, there's a nice GIS map here if it loads. And so on the first page, it's got a description of kind of the challenges and the rules. And then for all of the different species, it's got suggested waters and places to go for where to catch these fish. And I just want to mention, for the fish to count for the challenge, they don't have to be from a stream that's listed on this website. These are just places we suggest to go. It's by no means an exhaustive list of all the waters in the state of Arizona where you can catch these species. But anyways, definitely just wanted to mention that so you guys can check it out, because I think it's a really good program and it's a really fun challenge. And then just to kind of give you a quick list for the best places I think to go to catch our 2 native trout species. So for wild Apache trout, I really think the best, really there's 3 really good streams to go to. One's the West Fork of the Black River, the other one's the West Fork Little Colorado, and then the East Fork Little Colorado River. All 3 of those fish really good. There's a lot of Apache trout in them. I typically use small nymphs when I'm fishing there, or if it's later in the summer, a lot of times I'll use a small foam ant, killer ant, I believe is the name of it. But those are some of my favorite patterns to fish out there for wild Apache trout. But then there's also several lakes and different streams where we stock Apache trout for recreational purposes, where you can also catch them. Silver Creek is a pretty famous one. I'm sure most of you have heard of that or probably fished it. And then for Gila trout, well, starting May 1st, you're going to have 2 wild streams open. So Dude and Grapevine. Haven't fished them yet because they haven't been open to angling. So I can't give you advice on what I think what's going to work because I don't know. But I suspect it's going to be similar to the Gila trout. I think especially the first couple months they're open, those fish are going to be pretty naive to any flies. They haven't seen anything yet. So I would expect small nymphs under indicators will probably work well, or small dry flies would also work. That's my thought. And then the East Verde River is also a really, really cool opportunity. We're stocking really big Gila trout. And so that fish in that photo is actually a fish I caught from the East Verde this past summer. It was just over 14 inches. So really just a beautiful Gila trout. So that's a really cool opportunity that I think everybody should check out. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that we do have a lot of volunteer opportunities. Particularly most of them are in the fall, and they're mostly helping out with our Gila trout stockings. And this year, I think we're actually going to have some Apache trout stockings too, so there might be an opportunity to stock Apache trout. But typically, we need volunteers to come help us pack these fish into locations. Some of them are easily accessible, some of them are not. That's typically our biggest volunteer need. And the best way to volunteer with us is to reach out to me. I've got a list that I keep, and I can include all of you guys on that list. I can alert you to any volunteer opportunities that we might have. And then finally, I just want to thank everybody who helps us with all these efforts. Particularly all the other employees at Arizona Game and Fish who helped me do all this work. It wasn't just me by myself. Our partners with the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, New Mexico Game and Fish, TU, Moore National Fish Hatchery, and then Backcountry Hunters and Anglers have also been pretty active with us as well. And I'll take any questions or anything that you guys have, or fire away.
Hey, I've got one for you.
Sure.
You were talking about planting eggs in streams.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Dave Whitlock's box he developed decades ago for doing just that?
Yeah, we have seen several of those different types of egg boxes.
The vibrant box, I think he called it.
Yeah, that might be the name of it. I can't remember, but there are several versions of those egg boxes. The biggest problem with the egg boxes, and the reason we haven't used them yet, is because they require a lot of maintenance and paying attention to them, and someone having to be out there all the time. And we don't have the manpower to do that. But maybe that's an opportunity where folks like you could volunteer with us. If we wanted to go down that route, if you guys could volunteer to go out there and provide the maintenance for those different boxes, that might help us improve survival. But my staff is I have one person that works for me and then a summer intern. So it's hard for us to have the manpower to actually go out there all the time and do that.
Okay. Any other questions? Zach, that was a great presentation. I sure hope it recorded. And I hope you can get me a copy of that so I can pass it on to the guys in Colorado with FFI.
Can you hear me, Zach?
Yeah, yep, I can hear you.
This is Richard. I got a couple of questions for you. This is
Sure.
very interesting to me, so quick answers can be fine. On that Dude Creek, you said they were mixed genetics.
Yeah.
Do they have a better chance of survival? Because, we know in nature, more diversity is better. Have you guys found that, or is that something you're still looking at?
So I think that is the case, but I can't prove it.
Okay.
I certainly think that's why they're one of the strongest populations. Well, they are the strongest population in Arizona. I think it's because they've got all those different genetics in there. I think that's a huge advantage. Some of the geneticists on our Gila trout recovery team wouldn't necessarily probably agree with me. But
okay. Time will tell.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
The other question on the brood stock that you're just planting in some of these lakes and take and put, what are their genetics?
So the
Coming out
genetics
of
for
Mexico?
Yeah, so the genetics for the retired broodstock are varied. It just kind of depends on what Mora has, but they're typically one of generally they're going to be whiskey, main diamond, or south diamond for the most part. Those three lineages, because those ones are the most commonly raised in the hatchery, just because they do the best in the hatchery. The Iron Creek and Spruce Creek fish don't seem to do very well in a hatchery setting. We've had a really hard time being able to raise them, which is why it's been so difficult to get more of those genetics out on the landscape.
Yeah. And that eDNA, how long have you guys been using that? Has that been out for a while and you just something new that you guys here in Arizona are using, or what's the story on that?
No, eDNA is a fairly new tool. I don't know how new. I mean, I would say like early 2000s is when it first started to appear and people started using it. But yeah, now it's become very widespread use here. It's a very useful tool. It's not always perfect.
Right.
There can be a lot of mistakes with it. I mean, it's super sensitive. So like you could potentially have a heron eat a trout and then go upstream and poop somewhere where there aren't trout. And then all of a sudden you're going to detect that there's trout there, even though there aren't. So it's a very sensitive tool, but it's very useful. But it does have its flaws.
Sounds like it'd be great for you guys. The last question I had was on that Grapevine Creek, how the bunch of them had moved down and you guys were able to harvest them and bring them back up. Do you think, because you said that you thought they were growing awful fast, do you think they were moving because of looking for food or water temperature, or is there any idea of why they would move out of where they were at?
I think there's a really high density of fish in there. And so they were just, I think, looking for space. And there was water, and so they moved down. They don't know where water dries up or doesn't dry up. They just had the opportunity to move down and try to find more space and get more food. Yeah, so yeah, it's basically because of density dependence, I think.
Okay, that was great. Thanks for all the info.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, can you put it back on our regular screen we see everybody?
Yeah, of course. There you go.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
I'm still recording. Do you want me to stop recording?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. Okay.